security, and I think there's a broader context for the actions of the federal government. As everybody knows, the president recently went through an impeachment and stood up yesterday and basically suggested, celebrated the fact that the impeachment was over, and implied that he was innocent, and the process found him innocent of wrongdoing. That is fake news. He was not found innocent. He was celebrating and suggesting a falsity. He was acquitted. He was not exonerated. And there is the world of difference between the two. So when he was holding up a newspaper and suggesting that he had done nothing wrong, that's not accurate. We have here the New York Daily Truth that has an accurate, factual headline, which is Trump acquitted, not exonerated. Trump fails to learn lessons of Ukraine, repeats political extortion at Department of Homeland Security. That's the New York Daily Truth, right? Why is it important? There's a world of difference between acquittal and exoneration. Acquittal means you have not been found guilty. That's what acquittal means. That he went through the trial in the Senate, and the Senate did not find him guilty. True. It does not mean he was exonerated. Exonerated means I did nothing wrong. I was vindicated. I was cleared. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true, right? First of all, the jury that acquitted him was not actually a jury of peers. It was not actually objective. It wasn't a jury of peers. It was a jury of partisans, and it was a pure partisan vote. Even the Republican senators, many of them went out of their way to say they do believe the actions were wrong. But they didn't think he should be impeached. He shouldn't get the political death penalty for what he did. The punishment didn't fit the crime, or let the people decide. But even the Republican senators said what he did on Ukraine was wrong. The reason it's important is because the president will continue to do what he did on the telephone with Ukraine. And what he did was tried to extort Ukraine. It was an abuse of power. Do this for me or I won't give you money from the U.S. government. Yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security did the same thing with the state of New York. It is political extortion. We disagree with your position on driver's licenses for undocumented people. Because we disagree with your position, we're going to revoke participation in a program called Global Entry Trusted Traveler Program. These are two wholly unrelated things. They want to make a political point that they disagree with New York's position allowing driver's license for undocumented, which is our position. We believe undocumented people in the state should be allowed to have a driver's license. We want them licensed. We want, from a public safety point of view, we want to know that the drivers who are on our roads are licensed. By the way, about 15 other states in the United States are doing the same thing. Some of them Republican states that are doing the same thing. Because from a state point of view, it makes sense. You want to make sure that your people are licensed if they're on your roads. President's political position is, we're against immigration, and that's his political position. I get that. What they're now doing to make political hay, to advance their political argument, is they take the Department of Homeland Security in an abuse of power, in a hyper politicalized use of government, Department of Homeland Security says we're going to disallow the trusted traveler programs, which are basically a pre-clearance for entry into the United States. You go through a background check, you sit with a federal official, and if you gain clearance, when you come into the country, you have an expedited entry because you were already cleared for the Customs and Border Patrol. They're saying we're going to disallow New Yorkers from that program because New York passed a law allowing driver's license for undocumented, and because we don't have access to your DMV records. First of all, you don't need access to Department of Motor Vehicle records to do the global traveler clearance. When you go for this clearance, you present yourself to a federal official. You have to go in person and provide the information to the federal government. They ask you for documents, they interview you, and then they decide. They don't have to go to a DMV database. You have the person in front of you. Second of all, our DMV database, we give it all to the FBI. If Homeland Security wants access to our database, just go to the FBI, who they work with all the time. And the FBI has the entire database. Third of all, you don't even need a DMV license to have global entry. You don't have to be a licensed driver to qualify for the federal Trusted Traveler Program. It is pure politics. Pure politics. The Deputy Secretary who announces this yesterday, his name is Cuccinelli, former Attorney General from Virginia, ran for governor against Terry McAuliffe and lost. An extreme conservative Trump advocate. He says in the conversation at the press conference, we spoke to political people in the state of New York, including Congressman Reed and Congressman Zeldin, and they want us to do this. Congressman Reed and Congressman Zeldin are two Republican conservative congresspeople. You actually admit that you made this decision based on the wishes of two New York State Republican conservative politicians? There's supposed to be a line between politics and government. You're not supposed to be using government as a political tool. That's the point of Ukraine. Yes, you want to investigate Joe Biden. Yes, we understand that. He might be your opponent. You can't use federal money to extort Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. You can't put those two things together. You want to make a point about immigration. I understand that. You want to make a political point that Democrats are bad on immigration and they shouldn't give undocumented people a driver's license. I understand that. You can't then use the government to come up with an arbitrary policy that hurts hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers to make your political point. You can't do that. It's an abuse of power. It is extortion. And it's exactly what you did at Ukraine. And you didn't learn the lesson. Because you believe that you were found innocent. You weren't. You were acquitted. You were not exonerated. They didn't find you guilty, which is totally different than saying you did nothing wrong. And they never said you did nothing wrong. As I said, even the Republican senators, I don't think he should be impeached for this. Let the people decide. We have an election coming up. Let the election determine it. And many of them said, yes, what he did was wrong. But I don't think he should get the political death penalty. It didn't rise to the level of political death penalty. He was wrong. Extortion is wrong. Abuse of power is wrong. It was wrong in Ukraine, and it's wrong here. And we're going to sue the federal government. We're going to disclose this political intrusion into government, this ham-handed political tactic that once again hurts New Yorkers to make their political point. They did it with the state and local tax deduction, where they cost us billions of dollars to give New York dollars to their political-friendly states. He did it when he won't approve gateway tunnels, which will bring Amtrak trains into New York and the entire Northeast. The president did it when he said, I'm moving out of New York, I'm moving to Florida. Why? Because politically, it helps him, he thinks, to move to Florida because maybe he can win Florida politically. He knows he's not going to win New York in the re-election. So politically, he wants to move to Florida. It's always his politics first. And he uses the government to do that. It is an abuse of power. It is extortion. It is hurting New Yorkers to advance their political agenda. And we're going to fight back. Yes, I'm sure Congressman Reed and Congressman Zeldin called up the Department of Homeland Security and said, we want to do this politically. It's called Homeland Security. It's a government agency. It's not called political hacks. It's not called political tool to advance the president's political agenda. The taxpayers pay for that service because it's supposed to be a bona fide service that serves the public. Public servant does not mean you serve Trump. It means you serve the people. That's why the people pay your salary. And someone has to call them on it, and we're going to call them on it here in New York. And I want to hear what the Department of Homeland Security says their justification was, who they talked to about doing this before they did it, and let them justify to New Yorkers that there was actually a bona fide connection here, which there is not. The congressman who heads the subcommittee in the House that supervises DHS says there is no connection. You don't need a DMV database to grant a global entry or trusted traveler permit. It's totally false. It's all politics. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it forthwith, as they say. With that, let me turn it over to our great health commissioner to give an update on coronavirus.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. As we have said over the past few weeks, the risk to the public in New York State is currently very low. The department is in daily communications, often several times a day, with our colleagues at the CDC, at HHS, at New York City Office of the Department of Health, the Port Authority and local health departments, and healthcare providers statewide. And together we are all closely monitoring the developments in China as well as here in the United States. There are 12 cases nationally, and our focus continues on aggressively identifying any new potential for exposures among travelers returning to New York. Now, regarding travel, there have been several reports regarding a cruise ship that was docked in Bayonne, New Jersey. What we can tell you is that we understand 4 individuals have been taken to University Hospital in Newark for observation, but that none of the individuals were experiencing symptoms consistent with novel coronavirus. We've added this novel coronavirus to the department's list of communicable diseases, which requires healthcare providers to report persons under investigation to their local health departments and ultimately to the State Department of Health. Reporting and investigating of cases is already taking place, and adding novel coronavirus to this list will improve our ability to coordinate efforts with local health officials to control the spread of the disease if necessary. Additionally, the Wadsworth Center, which is our New York State's public health lab, is working closely with the CDC to get the ability to perform the test for the novel coronavirus. And we're working quickly to implement that testing. The bottom line is we are very well prepared for this response, and New York State and local public health officials and all the healthcare facilities are very experienced with infectious control practices. And while the novel coronavirus is not an immediate threat to New Yorkers, let us please not forget that the flu is still prevalent in New York State and has not yet peaked. According to the latest surveillance report, last week alone, 1,889 New Yorkers were hospitalized with lab-confirmed influenza. And that same week, 17,321 lab-confirmed flu cases were reported. That's a 15% increase from the week prior, and one of the highest single weeks of activity we have seen. And there have also been 13,460 flu-related hospitalizations this season since around October. So every day, preventive actions can help stop the spread of both flu as well as the novel coronavirus. Wash your hands often, cover your mouth or your nose, and when you sneeze into your sleeve. Stay home if you're sick. This is really important. If you're not feeling well, the best thing to do is to stay home. If you want, call your doctor, call your health professional, but don't run to the emergency room unless it's truly an emergency. And finally, I'd like to just address what I think is a very disturbing trend. Concerns about novel coronavirus should focus on public health and safety, not used as an excuse for anti-Asian racism or xenophobia. As I've mentioned, while the risk of novel coronavirus risk is still low, New Yorkers should remain vigilant in protecting themselves and their families, and we really should just stick together, not attack one another. We're going to get through this like we've gotten through so many other things. Thank you very much.
Well said, Commissioner. And just as the Commissioner said, yesterday we were contacted by the Federal Department of HHS and CDC on the cruise ship that was coming into the New York harbor. There have been no confirmed cases of coronavirus on that cruise ship. 4 people are being tested, but there were no confirmed cases, and we're working with them on that. And just to reiterate what the Commissioner said, there are no confirmed cases of coronavirus in New York thus far. We would expect, as time goes on, that we will find a case of coronavirus. If you look at the spread of it around the world, we would expect that, and we are prepared for that. We have taken a lot of time to put protocols in place and quarantine procedures, etc. But again, I understand the fear. We've gone through this before, Zika virus, Ebola, etc. But let's have some connection to the reality of the situation. And as the doctor said, catching the flu right now is a much greater risk than anything that has anything to do with coronavirus. Let me turn it over to Rick Cotton, who's the Executive Director of the Port Authority, who can speak about the coronavirus and how it's affecting flights, et cetera. Rick?
Thank you, Governor. At the Port Authority, we continue to work closely at all of our airports with our federal, state, and local partners, including the New York State Department of Health, to ensure that the mandated screening of returning international travelers to the United States is handled smoothly and without incident. Since the order went into effect on Sunday afternoon, at JFK, the CDC has screened 6,664 travelers. 3,100 of those travelers came on 14 flights nonstop from mainland China. The remainder of those screened, about 3,500, came on other flights and were flagged for CDC screening due to recent travel to mainland China. Of the 6,664 travelers who have been screened, 5 have been referred for quarantine. The Port Authority is prepared to continue to assist its partners as we work to protect the public health. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Questions?
Governor, regarding preparations in New York State handling an outbreak of coronavirus, assuming something like that were to happen in the worst case scenario, does the state and the city, by extension, have enough beds to really handle something like that?
You want to take that, Doc?
Sure. We are extremely prepared for this. We have supplies, but not only have we been working with the local health departments on a regular basis, whether locally with the city, but all across the entire state, we also have an entire stockpile available for any materials that we would need.
And do we know the level of contagiousness? I mean, is it the kind of thing that if people were in their apartments, it could come through the vents? I mean,
So this is what we're learning. I mean, this is a new virus, and so we can look at this and try to model it from other coronaviruses that we have, but this is a science that's evolving. We have to figure out how many people one person could infect, and that determines the spread of the disease, and we have to sort that out right now. And we haven't sorted out the entire answer on that.
Governor, if you look at this week, several different events from all the DHS news to the State of the Union to the fiasco in Iowa, what's your response to the pundits out there saying this has been a really bad week for Democrats?
You know, I don't, look, who has a political crystal ball that they would rely on right now, right? Everything changes so quickly. So I don't know. Iowa was obviously not good for the Democrats in general. Not a good look, as they say. You know, the Democrats, I think one of the things they battle nationwide, that they battle in this state, is basic concept that that's a great idea, that Democratic idea, that's a great vision. Can you actually do it? Is it workable? Are you competent to do it, right? Democrats battle that sense that they have great ideas, but it just doesn't work a lot of times. And to the extent the Iowa Democratic elections made them look like they were not running a competent organization, I think it plays into that. But Iowa is going to be gone after New Hampshire, and then, you know, nobody will remember. It's the way we work now. We're so saturated with information. It's like we just delete anything that is from the past. But I don't think any of that has a lasting consequence. And I think President Trump's, the best argument against President Trump is made by President Trump. I think he does it every day. And I think that's what we're seeing today. From this impeachment, he learned nothing. He learned nothing. To stand up and proclaim victory, just because you're not kicked out of office doesn't mean that you were exonerated. You did something wrong. Your own people said you did something wrong. Learn from it. And don't get haughty and celebrate that you weren't convicted and went down in the history books as one of only several presidents who got kicked out of office. I mean, it's not grounds for celebration. And hear what everybody says when they said what you did in Ukraine was wrong. And don't do it again. Don't do it again. He came back the next day, same thing they're doing with DHS. Same thing. Abuse of power, using a government agency for political purposes, hurting people for your own political agenda, using public servants like political hacks. Came back the next day, did the same thing. So that's his problem politically, is himself. And that's hard to run from.
In terms of Hiram Monserrat, the former state senator, is looking to make a comeback and potentially run for assembly. Wondering your thoughts on that. Obviously, you know his history, and whether or not the law can be changed to prevent him from actually being seated.
They're talking about changing a law generically. I haven't seen it yet, but something to the effect of if you have a felony conviction that may be qualified, that you'd be ineligible to run for office. I would be interested in anything like that. I don't think the voters of this state would say, yes, we want former felons in government.
Governor, just for the Trusted Travelers Program, what action are you taking next so we can say?
We're going to sue the federal government. We believe this was arbitrary and capricious. We believe it's illegal. We believe it was politically motivated. We believe Deputy Secretary Cuccinelli admitted as much when he said he had spoken to Congressman Reed and Congressman Zeldin, and they wanted him to take this action. That's not how you make policy. That is only evidence of political interference in making policy. This will hurt this state economically. It will hurt businesses. It will hurt regions of the state. It will hurt Buffalo, Western New York, where you have the Peace Bridge, where you have a lot of traffic going back and forth, and they use what's called the Nexus program, which is one of these programs. It'll hurt Northern New York, the Adirondacks, the Canada border. It will hurt the Port Authority, JFK. You'll see more congestion. It hurts national security, because what it did was it took a select group of people who were pre-screened at length, an in-person interview with documentation, and it said, we don't have to worry about this person. So the Customs and Border Patrol had more time to focus on other people. Now you're taking this person, you're putting them right back into the line. So it's adverse to the national interest. And I don't think they can defend it legally. And I would love to hear the depositions about their justification for doing this and the political influence in doing this. And I'd love to know if there were conversations with the White House. You know, New York is their political punching bag. Why? Because we're a quote-unquote blue state, and they see blue and they see red like some people see black and white. And if you are a blue state and they can't win in this state, well, then I'll literally move out and move to Florida, and maybe it'll help me to move to Florida, which is what the president did. And everything is a political jab at New York to cater to his red base. They literally took money from New York and gave it to the red states in the state and local tax deduction. Literally took billions of tax dollars from New York and redistributed the money to red states. Why? Because it was politically advantageous. Because they gave their states and their donors a tax break. It's the same pattern over and over and over again. And New York is not his political piñata. Period.
Last question, guys.
Lee Zeldin's taking some exception to your claims. He said it's quite rich. He says DMV records are used for everything from tracking down drug dealers to finding sex offenders, and that DHS should be closed off from that.
I didn't say it. The deputy secretary from the Department of Homeland Security, in announcing the policy, said at a press conference, I spoke to political leaders, including Reid and Zeldin, and they wanted me to do this. I'll get you the exact quote. We'll find it for you. But words to that effect. Second of all, I understand that they want the DMV database. I understand that. Why? Because it now has the undocumented New Yorkers who have a license. They want those records. I don't want ICE to have those records. Why? Because ICE will use those records to, as a means to do deportations. The way ICE does a deportation has wreaked havoc all over this state. We have numerous complaints against ICE for civil rights violations, human rights violations. We had an incident with ICE here in New York City just a couple of days ago where they shot an unarmed young man in the face, right? So we don't want ICE to have the deportation records. They do want ICE to have the deportation records. I get it. And that's a difference of opinion. And that's what's called a state's right, which the Republicans used to argue. Republicans used to say states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. Now they're in the federal government, they say, to hell with state rights. I get it. But I don't want ICE to have the records. They want ICE to have the records. But what is the possible justification for turning off the Trusted Traveler Program? To extort me to give you the records? I never will. I never will. And don't try to extort me, and don't try to extort New Yorkers. It won't work. Didn't even work with Ukraine. Learn the lesson. We're not going to be extorted. Also, anything you want on the DMV record in terms of criminal history, the FBI has it. Just go to the FBI. They're right next door to you. All those federal agencies, I worked in the federal government, they're all there, one block after the other. Leave your desk, go down the stairs, go to the FBI. Can I have the access to the criminal records in New York? They have the database. It's all a joke.
While the administration was in Albany this week, talking to legislators and saying that there's going to be a real cost shift to the city of more than $1 billion regarding the Medicaid changes. Is that an accurate number, you think?
No. Where did it come, on what theory?
This is what they were saying. I don't know if it is or isn't.
A lot of people, look at what the Trump administration is saying. Anyone can say anything nowadays. There is no cost shift, okay? Medicaid is very simple. And there's still facts. You know, anybody can say anything, but there's still facts. I can say I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and a little button nose. But you know what? I don't have a little button nose. And you know how you know? Because it is painfully obvious. That's how you know. So there are still facts. The problem with the budget is the Medicaid program is now going up at 7% per year. 7% per year is unsustainable, period. It's not whether or not you can pay 7% per year. It's, can you survive 7% per year? No, no. You can survive a normal inflation index, which is about 3%. So we say to our partners around the state, we can't pay 7. We have to get it down to 3, which, by the way, historically was exactly where it was. This deviation only happened, Zach, after the locals were no longer paying any money, okay? So we have to get back to 3. And this is how we'll do it. You have to have a financial incentive and disincentive. Anything under 3 will give you 25% of the savings. You can make more money than you did last year. Anything under 3 will give the local government 25%. Anything over 3, you pay. If you don't go over 3, you don't pay anything. You go under 3, you make money. Period. End of story. We made, in retrospect, when we eliminated the local government's 25% share, they no longer had a financial incentive. And they run major components of the program. Go to any local government. Go to the New York City website. They do all the financial eligibility, which means what? When you come in and you say you're financially eligible, I have to do due diligence. I have to make sure you didn't transfer any assets. They do the evaluation as to what service you should get. Nursing home, home care. They make the determination how much home care. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 24 hours. They then reevaluate that. New York City, there's 1,800 people who run the Medicaid program. We don't do anything. But then what are the 1,800 people doing? It's a lot of people to do nothing, even in government. So that's the issue on the local side. The MRT, Medicaid Redesign Team, then brings together industry partners to find efficiencies and eliminate waste within the industry. And between those two, the industry eliminating the waste, finding efficiencies, local governments, you now have accountability again. It's 3%, the way it was always 3%. When you paid, it was 3%. You know, when you paid for the restaurant, Zach, we went to McDonald's. All of a sudden, I pay, and you want to go to a high-priced steakhouse. Funny how that works. Let's make believe you're paying, and we'll go back to a lower-cost restaurant, 3%. Anything over 3, you pay. Anything under, we give you back 25%. You can't project it's going to cost you anything because you don't know what you're going to spend. Spend 3%, cost you nothing. Spend under 3, you'll make money.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.